How's it going, everybody? And welcome to our third video on VMware vSphere and some of the cool parts to it. Now in this video we're going to look at more of the theory, and actually a lot of theory. Majority of it's going to be theory. So just so you have an understanding of what VMware does and what its business and systems solution is supposed to be for the real world, and why it's such a widely used technology. I mean, virtualization has been around for like 30 or 40 years now. I believe IBM, I think it was IBM, was the first company to actually discover that you could virtualize hardware. But it wasn't until I think the last decade, maybe 12 years ago, when virtualization actually started picking up steam. And now here we are in 2014, and I'm studying for VCP. I never thought that would happen, but just a little bit of background on the actual exam, if you're interested in taking it. The VCA, which the Virtual VMware Certified Associate, which is basically the CCNA for VMware, is an online, web-based, open book exam that you pay. You got to go to VMware. You got to go take a. They recommend you take the VCA Data Center Virtualization Fundamentals course, which is I think 2.5-3 hours long. They run through a little Java Flash pop-up that goes through. Some guy explains a bunch of stuff in some slides, and then you can go in to as long as you're logged in online, you can go in and register to take the exam. Which actually, what you end up doing is you request authorization to take the test from VMware. You create a VMware account through Pearson VUE, and then you pay the $120 to go take the test. It's a web-based online test, which means that I took it from home. I came home from work, I paid the $120, I took the test, I got a perfect score on it because of the fact that you can look up the answers. But I really didn't have to because of the fact that I had already gone through the fundamentals videos, and I already had a pretty good understanding of what virtualization was doing. I've worked with it in the real world and seen it working in several environments, so I'm no stranger to virtualization. I just decided now, and the reason why I'm taking this is going through VMware is because of the fact that I found out from being in the IT world for just a couple of years now and working in the network and server and infrastructure side of the house. I don't have anything to do with programming or any real heavy-duty server or development, but a lot of what I do, I realize that Cisco is not the only thing that's out there, and I have to diversify to keep myself as an edge in the market. Because a lot of times you'll walk into a company, they might not be running Cisco, or they might be running some Cisco here and there, but maybe Juniper or Extreme or F5 or not F5, but some other vendor, maybe HP. So what you have to do is you have to make yourself more marketable out to the job market. And having Cisco is great, but I found out very quickly that if they're not running Cisco, you're not worth a dime to them. So I mean, you might understand the concepts to how routing and switching work, or security and data center, or something to that effect, but you're not going to be really useful to them if they're running all Juniper. You don't know the operating system, so there's a learning curve for you to learn the operating system. Even though you might be a CCIE, you still have to learn the Juniper operating system, Junos, or learn HP's operating system, or whatever the case may be. So I decided to diversify a little bit, and I feel like it's going to make me more marketable, whether it's going to be for a consulting contract or full-time employment. I work right now, but who's to say I'm going to stay there? So, but that's the premise behind why I'm doing this and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that my interest in the technology will get you interested in the technology. Maybe you're going to want to follow the same path as me. So for those of you that have been following me for a little while, I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It's as soon as I release a new video, if whatever you subscribe to, there will be a number counter for every video that I upload, and you'll be able to see once I'm done with this series how everything's working out. But anyway, I know I'm 5 minutes in already, and I haven't even discussed VMware yet, so I do apologize about that. So let's jump in. So the first thing we're going to look at is what is data center virtualization and why is it out there? What is it got that we need to have in our environment? So once we are done, you and I should be able to define and describe the need for data center virtualization. So we'll provide an overview of the features of vSphere 5.5 and the products that VMware has to solve business challenges. So I know it sounds a little marketing, but it's, I'm trying to keep it kind of exam centric so that when you go to take your exam and you see something pop up, you're going to be, oh, I remember it. Rob mentioned this, and you can go in there and you're going to know the answer off the top of your head. So from a high level overview, what is data center virtualization? Well, in a nutshell, from a technical perspective, it's the conversion of hardware devices into software resources. So what does that mean? Well, that means basically we can separate the server operating systems and the applications from the underlying hardware by presenting virtual hardware that does the same job. Okay, basically what you're doing is you're taking a physical server. So let's take it from something you'll understand already. You're on a computer, or maybe a tablet, or you're on your Galaxy S4, and that device has got a operating system, whether it's Android, whether it's Apple, whether it's Mac, whether it's Windows, Linux, Unix, whatever the case may be. I'm not so sure about Unix, but anyway, it's got an operating system, it's got a motherboard, it's got a CPU, it's got RAM. So you take all these components. The motherboard is where the CPU, the hard drive, and the RAM all connect into, and then the motherboard facilitates the conversation between them, right? Well, what ends up happening is with VMware, you take that same physical hardware, the CPU, the hard drive, and the memory, the RAM in this case, and you allow more than just one operating system to use it. In most computers, you go to like Sam's Club or Best Buy, you pick up a laptop, it's got a single operating system, 4 gigs of RAM, a 500 gig hard drive, and then a maybe quad-core i7 processor. Okay, that's great. You spend $600, you got yourself a decent laptop. I wouldn't do any hardcore gaming on it, but it's going to be good for Facebook and email and things like that. What VMware does is it allows you to take that same hardware, so your CPU, RAM, and hard drive, and instead of having just one operating system, it allows you to install multiple operating systems. So you take ESXi. So I don't really know. I don't know what ESXi itself stands for, but it's not anything that I've ever been told what it stands for. So I'm not even going to go there. But what it does is you install ESXi onto a server, a physical box. So there's going to be still some physical boxes in your data center. You're not going to be able to go completely virtual. How are you going to install vSphere? You're not going to be able to. Well, I'm sorry, not vSphere, but ESXi has to be physically installed onto a physical box. So you get it installed, you configure it, and you're up and running. So now you have an IP address, maybe a DNS name to log into. You pull up a web browser, you connect into the box. So now this is basically the same thing as you taking a brand new Cisco or Juniper router, you throw an IP address on it, you give it a domain name, and you throw it in your data center, and you're able to remote in via Telnet or SSH. Okay, so you do the same thing and you're able to configure it remotely, so from your desk. So those two things are pretty much the same regardless of which way you throw it. What ends up happening at this point is, well, it's Cisco. We're going to put that out to the side right now. We're not going to talk about Cisco. What ends up happening now is you're able to take the hard drive or the SAN or the network attached storage that's out there, and you're able to use the data store, maybe the hard drive that's plugged into the CPU slot, or I'm sorry, the hard drive slot, and you're able to actually load operating systems into ESXi. So what I do, because of the fact that I don't have a SAN available, I do have network attached storage through my network. I have a 2 terabyte external hard drive that I use for backups and movies and videos and things like that. But what you end up taking is you're able to take that operating system, load it to the hard drive of the server, and then you're able to, and I'll actually show how to in the previous video. I showed you how to get a operating system into ESXi and how to get a server installed and all other good stuff, and so I'm not going to go into that. That's already been covered. So it's been like a week since I recorded that video, but anyway. So you end up taking that. So now you've got ESXi loaded. So now you've got this guy. Alright, so we have this guy loaded. So we're going to click right here. Now you're at this page. What do? Well, what ends up happening now is I've got 24 gigs of RAM on my server. I've got 2 quad-core CPUs. So I have 2 sockets, 8 core, or I have 2 processors. I have 4 cores per socket. Okay, so that means I have logical processors. I have 16. So what ends up happening now is I can take these CPUs, this hard drive space, this 225 gig or whatever I've got available here, and then all this memory, and I'm able to divvy it up to all these different machines. I've got 2 servers running. Right now I've got about 8 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM utilized out of 24. I could fire up my Windows 7 box, which I've given it 16 gig. I wouldn't be able to give it that much right now, but I could. I could fire it up, but it would overload my system. But what I've done is I've got these 5, you can forget about these 2 right here, that was testing something. But I've got these 3 servers installed on this ESXi server. So what I've done with this guy, and he's running, let's go to getting started, actually summary. So I've got, let's go to resource allocation, there we go. So I gave him just under 6 gigs of RAM. He's using about a gig and 3/4. I gave him 60 gig hard drive, 50 gig hard or something like that. I gave him a lot of hard drive space. So what that's going to allow him to do is he can go in there now and he can run pretty much whatever he wants. Now I've got 2 operating systems running inside of this. So the basics to it is the ESXi server that I installed. vSphere allows me to manage and do what I want with that server. So the physical server is called a host. You take the host and you install guests. These are all guest operating systems. Right, so I have Windows 7, I have a Cisco IOS XR for studying for my service provider certifications with Cisco, and then I have 2 Windows servers installed. Windows 7 Pro Service Pack 1 for, I do a lot of GNS3 in this guy. But, so we take all of this and we're able to manipulate it so that we can have multiple guests on the same box. We take that same capability and we add features to it. So you're able to spin up Active Directory, email, web services, SharePoint, SQL. Doesn't make a difference. It'll still run. It's just like like you took Windows Server, installed it to a regular server, a physical box. You installed one server on one server operating system on one physical server, running say 2 or 3 different services. You're done. That's typically how things used to work. Not anymore. So nowadays, what you get is you have ESXi installed on a physical server, and then you start uploading. Well, in this case, in my environment, I have to upload because I don't have the capabilities of running other things. I don't have my network set up for Pixie. I don't even think, because it's Windows 7, I don't even think it has the capability of doing Pixie boots. I could be wrong, but I've never tried. But I'm able to run it this way so that I can play with ESXi, play with domain controllers, play with Windows Server, understand domains, get things working. So at the end of the day, when I go take my VCP exam in 3 months or 4 months, whatever it is, I'll be more than qualified to take and pass the exam. So I'm more of a, I want to know hands-on how things work, not just read a book, pass a test. Because when you get in the real world, you're if it wasn't in the book, you don't know it. So hands-on experience, bar none, is the best in my opinion. So that's basically what we're trying to do, is take all this physical hardware and virtualize it so that more than one operating system can utilize it. So the virtual hardware is actually just software running within something called a hypervisor. So a hypervisor, in a nutshell, did I get that part? So for now, you can think of a hypervisor as a resource traffic cop. It's a good way to put it, because of the fact that you're allocating so much just to something. So it's just like if you were to, you know your car has got a V6 engine in it, and you've got room for 5 passengers. So you know you're going to be able to fit 5 people in your car. So it allows you to set the settings in your VMs, so that if you don't have a heavy duty application, maybe you're running, I don't know, web services, and you only need a 12 gig hard drive, because all you need is the web services IIS installed on the server, and then it goes to a SAN environment, and does all the database stuff to another server. It offloads the database applications to another server. So you can have a very small server footprint. The virtual server can be very, very small in physical size. When it comes to the virtual nature of it, with a 12 gig hard drive, maybe 4 gigs of RAM, and maybe one CPU. So the allocations that it's got are very, very minimal. But in the grand scheme of things, it's better than running a physical box. It might be the size of a small car, and having to allocate this, and it's you run into the issue in physical hardware of heating, cooling, and space. So this enables multiple VMs. Oh, I'm sorry. Take a step back. Its job is to provide each VM with access to the underlying physical resources. So a hypervisor is going to allow you to give each guest operating system the necessary hardware that it needs to run, but it virtualizes it. So it allows it to give it to more than just one host or one guest. This enables multiple VMs to share access to the same hardware without even being aware of each other. It's a beautiful thing. This leads us to one of the important advantages of DCV, Data Center Virtualization, and that is consolidation. I just walked into an environment about 3 weeks ago, and small company, I think it had like 300 users. There's 2 locations, they're right across the street from each other. They have a and I thought this was hilarious. They're on a cul-de-sac and a business park, and what they did is they actually took PVC pipe and they ran a couple of Ethernet cables underground so that they could connect the 2 buildings together. That's their WAN, so to speak. And one building is using the other building's internet connection to do all of its work. And building 1 is the primary, building 2 is the secondary building. And I mean, they're both small. They're the average size of a McDonald's. Both buildings are about the same size as an average size McDonald's. And I walk in, and they were 300 servers. 300. I walked in, their data center. You had to shout to have a conversation. It was ridiculous. And I'm like, I sit down, and if you were within 50 feet, basically anywhere inside of building 1, you could hear the data center anywhere. And what they did is they basically took a closet, like a conference room. They threw a couple of racks inside of it, and they just started mounting servers to it. They had a couple of switches, a couple of routers, and that was the end of it. And I walked in, and I was like, oh my god, what is this? And I didn't say it out loud, but so consolidation is just that. You're able to take the old server farms that would have rack after rack after rack of servers running, and then that one server might be the same size and height and dimension of a rack with router or switch, running a single application, like say file storage, and it connects down to the SAN or a network attached storage device somewhere. So when I walked in, I was just like, what do you want done? And he goes, well, we want to start consolidating servers. We don't want to run 300 servers. It's killing it. I think they were paying like $7,000 a month in power. It was ridiculous. And he goes, it's just we got too much going out the door and not enough coming back in. We need to do something quickly. And I said, okay, if you consider virtualization. And they had considered a lot of different things, but they weren't sure which way was the best way to go. And I recommended VMware and I showed them how to set it up. It was really simple. They took one server that they had maxed it out. So we ended up going out and buying a couple of Dell PowerEdge servers, loading up. We maxed it out on RAM on 2 of the servers, and we were able to, in a few hours, a lot of stuff that wasn't being used heavily, migrate those P2V them using vCenter converter, physical to virtual, and load them onto the ESXi host. And they paid the license for the enterprise version of ESXi, and I had them up and running in a weekend. But it's being able to get that specific issue and knowing what to do with it. So consolidation is a big part of that. Being able to take a lot of physical servers, a server that's running one application, maybe 10 gigs of RAM, terabyte hard drive, whatever the case may be. Whatever your physical hardware that you're running on that server, you're able to take that application, get rid of it to put it onto a virtual server, and take that same server, take the resources out of it, so the hard drive, the memory, the CPU pot potentially, offload it to this ESXi host, and you can run it there and make better use of your investment. So through DCB, we can consolidate our servers into fewer pieces of hardware. By reducing the number of physical devices in the data center, we can save money on power and cooling. So we also save money on capital expenses and management costs. So let's assume that you've got a data center that's the size of, you walk into a 10 by 20 storage unit. That's your data center. And so you got 200 servers in there. That's going to be a lot of servers in a small space. How are you going to cool that? So you're able to take, like I said, these servers that are running 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 applications and consolidate them down to a single box, depending on what your needs are. You can't just say, I'm going to take 200 servers and then I'll just drop them into one box. Doesn't always happen that way. You have to be smart about your transitions, and we'll talk about that more when we get into the vCenter topics, but that's the basic idea of it. So, in review of that, what are 3 advantages related to data center virtualization? And well, the answers are right there. They've been there the entire video. So, for one, it's less servers. It's less power and money saved on cooling. Because then, the one thing about setting up a large data center is you're going to have to worry about raised floor or drop down ceiling with all your cabling. And then secondly, you're going to have to worry about hot aisle, cold aisle. So you drill that down, you got hot aisle, cold aisle, and then how does the physical equipment take in and expel air? How does the intake work? How does the expelling of hot air work? Is it from front to back? Is it left to right? How does it get rid of the air? I mean, that's something you have to take into effect. You have to put the rack directly over a fan that blows straight up because the device blows left to right and you're going to try to expel it out the one direction. I mean, these are things you have to think about when you're designing your data center. So, why do we need DCV? Today, more than ever, IT departments around the world are being pressured. And I can tell you one thing, I know what it's like to be in those shoes, to where you're trying to migrate physical servers to virtual servers, and you're trying to figure out what applications need to be there, what don't, what can you move, what can't you move, what are mission critical, what aren't mission critical, to reduce their costs while at the same time improving system availability and agility. So, for some cases, you might only have one email server. That email server is mission critical to the company. Well, how do you take that down and not affect business? Well, you have to wait till it's after hours. Can you spin up an email server on the fly and just move it over? Maybe, but I'm sure there's going to be some impact of some sort when you're doing it. But I'm not an Exchange or a Lotus Notes or email guy, so I won't even get into too much more detail on that. This often poses some unique challenges for the organization because cost reductions are usually at odds with these system-wide improvements. So the idea might be to take your 200 server data center and physically break it down to say maybe 10 boxes running 10 ESXi hosts running 20 servers apiece that are connecting off to a SAN. So you're, instead of having, say, 10 racks of 20 servers each, 20, 10, 20, yeah, you're running, say, one rack of 10 servers. So you're able to greatly reduce your physical footprint, but then you have some other things. How do you get your infrastructure to fit in with that? How is your storage going to work? How is your networking going to work with that? These are things that do come into play. You probably have a number of physical servers sitting in the racks alongside other networking and storage devices. You may have different types of servers, each running its own OS, apps, and data. All these servers have one thing in common: power. Devices that use power also give off heat, and heat needs to leave. Cooling also takes some money, so DCB breaks the cycle of this. So you're able to take all these variables, dynamics, that's the word I was looking for. You're able to take all these dynamics and you're able to take them and put them into one pot and say, how are we going to deal with this? So VMware allows you to virtualize things that you wouldn't be able to virtualize before. And here's one of the kickers that I like about it. I was at a party wasn't exactly a family get-together, but my mother-in-law's friend owns a flower shop, and we went to go see the grand reopening. And there was a gentleman there who's a dentist. We chatted for a little while. I was introduced as Rob, the IT guy. He was interested in finding out what type of IT I did, and once he realized I had potentially a solution for his problem, he, being a dentist, he has this really old dentist software, and I was able to go in and get rid of the server that was giving him so many issues, which was running on Windows NT. NT4? Yeah, NT4. An operating system I've never actually physically touched before. And I took the application, which by the graces of God, he had saved the source code to the server, to the hard drive on the server. So I was able to take that source code for this software program that he had. I was able to copy it to a CD, I think it was like 60 megs, and then I was able to take that software, load it onto a computer that was used in the back room for file storage, and install it on that. And I put it in VMware Player, of all things. I installed NT4 on it because I was able to find the source code online. And it took me a couple hours to find it, but once I did, I was able to install it and install this software program on top of that, and then distribute it through group policy to all of his computers in his network. And they were all able to use it. It was actually a group policy app I was able to deploy it as. They did a double click on an icon on their desktop, that brought up the application, and away we went. And he was happy with that because it gave him the flexibility of getting rid of an old piece of equipment that was on its last legs. So, could I put a newer operating system on it? Probably. But he didn't want to mess with it, and I wasn't about to sit there and try to convince him otherwise. So, that is one thing that I was able to do. VMware Virtualization was able to help me do that. So, that's pretty much the extent of what we have to look at for what is data center virtualization. In the next module, I will look in depth at how the components of VMware work, and we'll get into the meat and potatoes of that in the next video. I hope this has been informative for you. I'd like to thank you for viewing.